1 2. Check check 1 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check check 1 2. Am I coming through online? There we are. Is that it? Yes. All right. Hello, everybody. That seems like it's really loud. Hi, Dave. My name is Bobby Marco. I'm the director of the Nashville Filmmakers Guild. Welcome to the Great NLE Debate. And we're glad you guys can make it. We are streaming live to the global community. And this is our 2015 edition. We hope to be more. There will be more. We're going to have some fun with this tonight. I'll let Scott, our moderator, introduce everybody. But I just wanted to mention real quick before we dive in, the Nashville Filmmakers Guild was created to inspire, to educate, and to uplift the creative community when it comes to film and video. So we're over 1,200 members on Facebook group, only Middle Tennessee members. So I think that's really impressive, and it keeps growing every day. Actually, we're getting new people signing up. So we hope that everything that we do, whether it's having fun with talking about NLEs and the differences and everything like that, to having workshops, guest speakers, things like that, we hope that you guys get something out of it, and really just are more knowledgeable about what you do, more inspired about your craft, and that's kind of the purpose of the Film Guild. So, welcome, and we're going to have fun tonight. We're looking forward to seeing what transpires tonight. So, all right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Scott Simmons. He's our moderator tonight, and he's going to kick things off for us, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Welcome.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, everybody, for coming to this, maybe it could be an annual event, the 2015 Nashville Filmmakers Guild NLE Debate. So before we get started, the idea for this came, we had been talking about what to do for the Guild, what kind of stuff to have at these different meetings, and I was watching one of the many debates we've had thus far already in the 2016 presidential election. At the same time, I was on the internet, reading some articles and reading through some comments on a particular article about editing. And there was lots of anonymous comments going back and forth, and people, calling each other names and saying some pretty nasty stuff all anonymously. And I thought, well, that would be fun to actually have a debate amongst, users of the actual NLEs, because what more is the internet for than to debate things back and forth? So I thought it'd be fun to bring out actual users and have them stand face to face and actually defend or talk about their NLE of choice. Of course, there were comments like, it's not about the tool, it's the stories you tell, and it's the person that runs the tool. And that's absolutely true. It's all about the stories that are told. All these NLEs up here, we've got Final Cut 10, Adobe Premiere Pro, and Avid Media Composer. They're all fine tools that can all tell the story equally well. I personally use all three of them in my profession as an editor here in Nashville. And I think they all can do a fine job. But like any great mechanic will tell you, mechanics have, my dad and my brother both build cars and airplanes, and they will often argue over what brand of tool my dad uses versus what my brother uses. And I look at them and I say, these are just a wrench. But it's like, oh no, feel this, look how this feels, and this one works this way, and this metal is made this way, and they have very strong opinions of what type of wrenches they're going to use, when to me they all look the same. So hence some fun with the actual debate. We're going to have, every candidate's going to get questions. Some questions will go to all three, some will go specifically to one of the users of the NLE. And they will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then they'll hear a little ding, just like a real debate. And then if they mention another tool, we'll let them do a little bit of rebuttal, and they'll have about 30 seconds to do a rebuttal. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for a little bit of audience Q&A. And we've solicited questions from Twitter, so we've got a few of those coming in as well. So let's get started. We drew numbers before we begin, and we've got Matt Fingston, who is an Avid Media Composer editor. And all these guys here are not... They're not from Adobe, Apple, or Avid. They are editors and filmmakers here in Middle Tennessee, and they are real users. We pitched this out to the Guild members to let them, come up and be part of the event. So that's where these guys. They've all volunteered for this, so nobody's being paid and no one was drafted into it. So we'll take it easy if need be. So we got Matt Fingston. He's an editor in town. He's with Avid. And we've got Jeff Holland on the far side over there with Final Cut 10. And we've got Joelle Evans, who's going to be our Adobe Premiere Pro editor on the stage here. We'll let you guys open it up with a brief statement about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about why you choose a particular NLE over the other. And we, as I said, we do numbers before we began. And we have Jeff with Final Cut 10. You can start it off.
Sure. My name is Jeff Holland. I'm a DP and camera op here in Nashville. I've also owned a wedding video company for the past 10 years, so I've edited hundreds of weddings, in addition to music videos, short films, you name it. So I used Final Cut, the original 5, 6, and 7, several years, and immediately embraced and switched over to Final Cut 10 when that happened. I'd have to say my goal tonight is to not necessarily make you a Final Cut Pro 10 user, but to just educate you on it and show you that it really is a professional editor that can accomplish anything any of these other editors can do, and that it has some really great strong points like metadata, media management, multicam editing, and it's really fast.
All right, Matt, you drew number 2.
All right. Well, I'm an editor here in town. I do a lot of freelance work, but for the last 4 years I've worked at a company called Quaver's Marvelous World of Music, which is kind of like Bill Nye the Science Guy, but it's for music education. And I guess my goal here is similar to his, just to remind everybody that Avid is still around, it's still very strong, and it has a lot of advantages over its competition.
Joelle?
My name is Joel Evans, and I own a company that we do a wide range of productions, from producing to a lot of the post-production stuff. I, as well, started off Final Cut and did the 5, 6, 7, was waiting on 8, and then that didn't happen. And so I'm eager to talk about why I switched over to Adobe.
Now, all the guys have the laptops in front of them, and they have their NLE running. This isn't a competition where they're all going to actually sit there and edit something. It's there more, but that might be a cool thing too. It's there more if they want to demonstrate a particular feature, or if someone calls out another one that says, Premiere can't do this, then, he can show us that Premiere can do that. So they may be using them, they may not. So that's why they're there. All right, so let's start off with sort of a basic question that I think everybody's asking. What are the main strengths of your NLE that sets it apart from the others on the stage? That's a good way to begin, and we'll go by our number draw. Matt, if you want to, I'm sorry, Jeff, you want to kick that off?
You were one.
You drew number 1, right?
I drew 2.
You drew 2. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Matt. You kick it off.
Well, I think the biggest advantage with Avid is from, I think, the business owner's standpoint. I also use Premiere a lot during my day job, and as a lot of people know, a lot of software, operating systems, pretty much any software, they've gotten really aggressive in the last 2 years about forcing you to keep current with the most recent version, which is great for them because it makes them a lot of money, but for the user it means you really end up spending a lot of money having to replace hardware that's not defective, that's still working, to stay current with, to stay compatible with what's coming out now. And what that means for the end user is that you end up having to spend a lot of money to keep doing what you were doing yesterday, not to gain functionality, not to gain value. And Avid has always had a really strong commitment to backwards compatibility. You can upgrade to when you upgrade when you want to. You can open old projects, you can open new projects in old versions of Avid, and they continue to support older versions of the software, so that when you invest in their product, you're able to get a lot of value out of that and use it until you really need to upgrade, until you need new capabilities.
Jeff, same question. What
Sure.
sets Final Cut 10 apart?
I would have to say, I just wrote down real quick here 4 different things I was thinking about. It's a really solid app. It's not very buggy. I think Multicam is a really strong feature for it. It's probably the best multicam editor I've used, and I've used Premiere as well as the original Final Cut and this Final Cut. It's all built on database, so the metadata and media management part of it could be really my favorite part. Working with documentaries and events like weddings and different things, just to be able to throw all your clips in there and just sort it and tag it and favorite it. It's really powerful. And then the price is really attractive, $300 I paid in 2011, and that's it. Every upgrade's been free.
Joel?
A huge part of why I loved, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, why I loved Final Cut 7 was its customizability. As a user, I love being able to customize every aspect of my NLE. And when I saw X come out and just saw how things, the initial part of how X came out, there were a lot of issues that I think a lot of people had. They've sort of done away with that now, but still, for me, why I love Adobe Premiere is because it gives me that same level, high level of customizability, because I like being able to, if I'm on a laptop, for instance, what my workflow might look like on a smaller screen will differ if I'm, for instance, at home where I have 3 monitors and a big TV, and how that translates in more real estate and seeing it all better and then being able to send things all over the place. But customizing things with screen layouts and just what my tools can do. One of my favorite transitions from Final Cut 7 to Adobe Premiere was the fact that just within the keyboard, you can choose Final Cut 7 and you're ready to go. So if you came from Final Cut 7 background, the transition was super fast. From there, because I always customize my keyboard layouts even within 7, I had those same options to do in Premiere. It was super fast and all that. Now, my favorite part of it is just how the actual editing happens. I didn't have to deal with the magnetic timeline or any of that new way of editing. I could literally pick up from where I was with 7, move over to Adobe, and everything was pretty much the same, except now I had the ability to use any footage I wanted to. I can dump anything from any DSLR, from any source footage, and I can just run with it just like that. So as it is right now, just being able to customize my overall layout is huge. Now, if I can touch real quick on the cloud part of it. If I'm going from my desktop at home and I'm coming to my laptop here, for instance, in a situation like this, my layout's saved in the cloud. I can go up, open it, and everything I had at home is right here, the exact same way I had it at home, which is super nice for someone who is detailed and very, very specific. You know, I like my stuff a certain way. I like my bins here. I like my viewer here with my timeline this sized. And I don't want to have to mess around with that every single time. Every time I open up the program, it's ready to go right there. So the cloud-based part of it, for that aspect, I really like.
So Jeff, he called out the magnetic timeline, which is obviously a big feature of Final Cut 10. It's a love feature for some. It's a hate feature for others. What's great about it? Obviously, you think it's great.
Sure. I'd have to say that was probably one of the big turnoffs, is when Final Cut came out with the new design of Final Cut 10. The magnetic timeline was a really different new way of editing. You didn't have any tracks. Everything just kind of snapped together. But to me, I mean, I kind of just embraced it, you know, being the Apple fanboy that I kind of am on the side. I just kind of took it and was like, all right, I'm going to try it and I'm going to go with it. And now, I mean, if I sat down in front of Premiere or Avid, it would take me 3 times as long to edit what I need to, just because I'm so fast in using the magnetic timeline and how it just keeps everything condensed together, and I can take a section here and highlight it and just drag it over here and everything stays the same and connected. Some people, you know, it's not their thing. It's got to be tracked and it's got to be this certain way, but I mean, if you can take the time to sit down and really figure out the magnetic timeline and how it works and how it would work into your workflow, I think it could definitely speed things up for you.
Do you have a quick, can you take your HDMI, your screen there and show a quick example of, you know, just if you're trimming something and how it pulls everything to the left, or how you can swap clips with connected clips?
Sure. Let me just pull up a random project here.
And while he's doing that, I will let either Avid or Premiere, do you guys want to address the idea that, you know, Premiere and Avid both, Media Composer both, like there is no magnetic timeline. If you put a clip somewhere, a clip stays, but the downside of that being that, you know, sometimes, as per Apple's marketing, things can easily go out of sync, or you can't necessarily, you know, if you want to move one clip that has a lot of B-roll attached to it or a bunch of sound effects, you have to either, you know, grab all them together with the segment mode or lasso them in Premiere. Apple would say it's just easier way to work by having this new magnetic timeline.
I think it's more of a preference thing, truthfully, because I have experience with X, and I know what that magnetic timeline allows you to do in terms of moving everything around. You have the ability to do all those things in Premiere as well, whether it's a simple nesting, if you just want to, like, I'm done with this section, if you're doing a documentary or something long form, and you edit it in sections perhaps, and you're done with this section, you can nest that, save it for later, move it around if you wanted to, or you can do a simple highlight of everything. One of my favorite tools in Premiere is the one that allows you to select everything forward of the playhead. You click on it, everything's selected, and you can move that anywhere you want to. So you're not having to select on my shift, it's none of that. It's just one click, and you have access to everything that you just selected.
Which, to be fair, Avid Media Composer has that as well.
Correct. So those are both great attributes.
I agree.
Premiere does not, Final Cut 10 does not have that, but the argument would be that with the magnetic timeline, you don't need that.
Sure, although I will admit that's one thing I have missed, is being able to click the button and everything is selected there. I have missed that. But I would assume that would be in there.
Well, I was going to follow up, because one downside of the trackless timeline is that you can't, if you're editing something to music, or if you have a reason you want a clip to just stay in place and never ever move ever, that's not possible.
Depends. Yeah. There is the place tool where you can drag things around and move it around.
But you can't work an entire edit in the place tool. That's often an argument. People say, oh, just hit P and do your full edit in position mode. But then you lose part of what Apple would say is the real power of Final Cut 10.
Very true.
At least in my mind. Did you find an example in there you want to show? Or?
Yeah, you can just, let's see. You can just take a look here. It's just, this is just a random promotional video I did for an event designer. Let's say I had all these night clips here. I was like, oh, I love this dark footage of the event space, but actually need it over here where the music's a little different. Just drag it over here, and it moves all the other stuff where it was. So I can start editing here with these night clips and then go into the other part. Or if I had a huge section with, let's see. You can see these here, like we were talking about the place tool a minute ago. Just a quick P key here, I can drag stuff within the timeline here, and it doesn't magnetize it.
That's a quick example. There's a lot more that it will do beyond with connected clips. But that, if you want to show something else later, you can. Let's move beyond features for a minute and talk about sort of the marketplace for the tools. This is another question down the line. Joel, we can start with you. What is Premiere's current place in the market? Where is its strengths? Where has it made inroads, and where has it maybe not been accepted just yet?
In my opinion, I think one of my favorite things that Adobe did, which I think a lot of people would agree with from all three NLEs, is the fact that they quickly made upgrades and improvements and adapted to what the market itself required. Instead of coming up with a product and saying, hey, this is how editing is now going to be, so you better jump on board, they looked at perhaps what now was missing, and I think they did an excellent job at filling that void, which is now Adobe CC 2015. What do I mean by that? I mean, because when I was in Final Cut 7, I loved Final Cut 7. And I had a couple friends who were on Adobe, and they was like, hey, you got to switch to Adobe. For a couple of reasons, they told me. I was like, no, I got to convert everything to ProRes, and I have 15 terabytes of footage as a result, but that's fine because I love just how it edits. I love how fast I am. I'm super fast on it. And then when Final Cut 7 was no longer supported, I had a real choice to make. And I still use 7 even within the first year, probably, of 7 no longer being supported. Because I loved it. I was like, no, I'm not going to be the guy that switches. I'm so loyal. But what Adobe did was they literally created their newest update of Adobe to almost replicate what the strengths that Final Cut 7 had, but they filled in the gaps for what the weaknesses were, meaning you could only use 4 gigs of RAM, 32-bit type of system. Now you got something that's operating at full capacity of whatever your machine will give it, and you have so much more durability to the program, as well as just more options in how you can input and edit and all these different types of projects that you have. So what I think is, like, if someone's looking in and seeing, okay, what's Adobe doing, what's Apple doing, what's Avid doing, I think, in my opinion, that Adobe did perhaps the best job at literally just going and say, okay, that's where the void is, we're going to fill that.
Matt, with Media Composer, definite market advantage there. Where is its strengths, for those that may not know?
Well, I think Avid's strengths is that it's really it's a solid, stable application. It's been around a long time, so it's had a lot of opportunities to solve any particular problem you might have in editing there are 4 or 5 solutions to any problem. And I find that that's really nice because oftentimes when I'm in other software, I'll run into a snag or something that doesn't work, and there's only one way to solve that problem.
Beyond features, though, like what market segments, where is Media Composer have its strengths out in the market, in the world?
For the most part, it's really strongest in Hollywood and high-end television production. It's still 70 to 80% of that market. And at any place where there's collaborative workflows, anytime you have lots of people wanting to work together on the same project and things like that. So,
Jeff, with Final Cut being new in the world, even though it's, what, 4 years old now, something like that?
Yeah, just over 4.
Where is its market strength? Does it have any particular places that's made great inroads? Or
well, I think when they first came out with it, obviously there was a lot of things missing as far as the professional market. It was kind of in the intermediate level. Nowadays, it's so full-featured. It's been used already in 2 major feature films, Focus, starring Will Smith, which came out this year, and then there's another film next year coming out, edited in Final Cut 10. I mean, it's definitely geared towards the guy like me who's the all-in-one. I need to be able to do all this stuff, but I mean, it's been used in TV shows, networks. It's really, I think, starting to expand more out into the upper level markets that it didn't really start out in because it was in its infancy.
Let's talk media management. It's a very important topic when it comes to editing. Media management's always very, everybody has their own philosophies behind it. All 3 of these NLEs have sort of different strategies when it comes to media management. Premiere is an approach like Final Cut 7 or Final Cut Classic, where it lives on your drive, is where your media lives, so it's important to be organized at the OS level. Whereas we've got both Final Cut 10 and Media Composer, in a sense, sort of manage media somewhat in the same way if you wanted to, by being able to sort of manage it internally. Just talking media in general, media management, what are some strengths and weaknesses you guys see from each of your NLEs of choice? Want to take it away, John?
Sure. So if anyone's familiar with how Final Cut 7 did operate, Final Cut Classic, I like that. It's very much a user organized type of deal. Let me talk about that part of it just for a few seconds here. If you're going to be an editor, a professional editor, if you're going to work on clients' projects, they're giving you all this footage that they might have spent $50,000 on because they just shot this music video, whatever, and now you are in charge of that post-production process, then media management really starts with your organizational skills. It's not I'm kind of disorganized, I'm just all over the place, but I'm super creative once I start editing. No. You got to get the organizational part of it down. So, if you're in Finder, if you're in Internet, Windows Explorer, if you're using a PC, by the way, Adobe works in both, then that's really where it starts. You're going to have your folder. If you're using a drive, you're going to start organizing everything there, right? I mean, that's pretty explanatory. Day 1, whatever, if you're doing episodics, then interviews here, whatever, however you want to organize it, you choose a way to organize it that's best for you. I don't think there's a specific way, but I mean, there are certain suggestions you can have. From there, that makes media management within Premiere super easy, because you're right. Let's say you have an iPhone, a GoPro, a couple of DSLRs, whatever, and they're all connected to your camera, to your computer rather. You can pull all that footage really quick into Premiere and you can see it right there, right? But that's a horrible way of bringing in your footage into any NLE. It's from all these different things. Because what Adobe is going to do is going to look at all these different places where this footage is coming from, and that's where it's going to expect it to be every single time it opens. So everything needs to be on a hard drive, your edit bay hard drive, something that's fast and robust and all that, and that's where it's coming from. Media management within Premiere is excellent in the manner that, let's say I'm done with a huge project. I do a lot of television shows. 2 minutes already. That's all I get.
All right, Matt, with Media Composer, you sort of have the best of both worlds. You can leave the media where you've placed it in your OS level and link to it, or you can have Media Composer transcode it and bring it in to explain a little bit how that works and why is that the best way to do it?
Well, Avid has always had, I mean, it's a database-driven system that's really kind of, I guess, plug and play, or it just works. It handles all the media management for you. And I found that, and it's also very, very solid. I found with Premiere, a lot of times the files are linked, but sometimes I'll start the project up and it will be missing render files for no apparent reason. I found Avid is very solid with that. I've also found that as time has gone on, as they move more from tape-based workflows to file-based cameras, the process of transcoding and importing into the Avid database started to kind of get in the way of getting things done fast, so they created AMA, this system of linking directly to the files wherever you want them to be.
AMA, Avid Media Access.
Avid Media Access. They're basically a series of plugins that the camera manufacturers make that allow you to do essentially what you could do in Final Cut 7 or in Adobe, where you can directly link to the files on your, and you organize them according to the way you want to. So you have the best of both worlds, and they also have made sure that it's very stable, works all the time. So.
Jeff, Final Cut 10, you can do something similar. You can leave files in place, or you can have it bring internally to Final Cut 10. Uses a library structure,
exactly.
A library bundle, which is totally different between the other two. Explain it. Why is it better?
Yeah, I kind of use both. Depending on the project. You know, if I'm shooting a wedding and I've just got a bunch of video clips and I just need everything concise and confined, I'll just import it all into the library. It gives me one file to keep up with. I don't have to worry about media being on this hard drive or something over here. It's just all contained within the one package. And you can still easily go into that package into Finder and view those files individually and drag it into After Effects or do whatever you'd like to with it. And then, as he said, you can also have a series of folders and your media within the folders and link from Final Cut into those folders. But then with the metadata and the database part of it, just being able to create collections like smart collections where I can tag several different clips with a series of keywords and have them show up here, but then also have them show up in this keyword collection. It just allows a broad sense of customization to your media when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with it. And saving like favoriting clips is another one of my favorite features with the media management. And in Final Cut, I can select an out point, favorite it, click a button up at the top, show favorites only, and now I've only got the best clips in my browser there. Another thing would be even to those things where it's automatic in the library, you can still customize. I want my cache files to be in here. There's no save button, so it's just automatically saving the database as you edit. You don't have to worry about saving. It'll make backups of your database, which you can select, save that in Dropbox, you know. Just so everything's backed up and saved. It's very good at doing that.
All right, let's go specific for a minute to an Adobe question. Premiere sometimes seems to get kind of a bad rap on social media for being unstable. If you were to like search, Premiere crash via Twitter search, you'd probably find a lot of tweets about Premiere crashing. How would you address the stability of Premiere in that perception? Or maybe you have stability problems with it as well.
Yeah, I do have stability issues with it. I think a lot of it is, oh, it just crashed. I'm kidding.
Head up on the screen.
A lot of it for me has to do with it starts with the power of the computer. I mean, if you're gonna be doing some pro type stuff editing, you're gonna have to have a pretty robust machine to handle it. What Premiere really relies on, in my experience, for instance, versus I think X, is a lot of RAM. Premiere is so hungry for RAM. I have.
So is a laptop a disadvantage with only 16 gigs of RAM?
Yes, I would say if I'm dealing with that same project and I'm doing the same kinds of stuff, then yeah, it would be a bit of a disadvantage. This is a pretty souped up laptop here in terms of the processor. It's close to my desktop, but the RAM is, I've only got 8 gigs on this one, whereas at home I have 32, and I can assign how much RAM Premiere uses, and any Adobe product will give you that option, so you're not completely sucking all the power of your computer. You can assign it for other things if you want to do some other stuff. But the stability issue for me comes if I'm doing a bit of cross in my resolution. If I'm pulling in 4K type stuff while also using 1080p, or if my base is 1080p and I've got a bunch of aerial stuff that I'm bringing in from the drone and it's all 4K, and or stuff from the Panasonic GH4 and it's all 4K, all the interviews are done with that, I'll sometimes see a little bit of hiccup, at least on my machine, and I'm running 3 monitors with that. For the most part, I don't think my biggest complaint is stability with Premiere, though. I'm not going to say what that is.
Well, that's a question. We'll get back to that.
It's for me, I find it's just really a machine-based type deal. Again, and I've dealt with all types of footage from all kinds of cameras, and it pretty much handles all of them pretty well. We're talking raw stuff. We're not talking anything converted. We're talking just dropping it right into Premiere, right from wherever it came from the camera, and you're good to go.
Just a quick yes or no. Media Composer crash on you? Is it?
Not very often, maybe a dozen times in the last 2 or 3 years.
What about Jeff with Final Cut 10?
Very little.
Very little?
Yeah.
Of course you'd say that. Of course you guys would say that. We had some questions coming in from Twitter. This one was from Joel Yeaton, and we'll go down the line on this one. What is one feature that you would stake your hat on as the single killer defining feature of your NLE versus the others? Take it away, Jeff. One feature, one single feature.
Media organization.
Meaning that favoriting keywords.
Favoriting keywords, smart collections.
Explain a smart collection real fast.
Smart collection, I can pull up one right here. Yeah, so I've got some promotional projects here I'm doing, and I want to pull all of the projects for this one company. So I said, here's a smart collection, and I want you to pull in projects that have the MZ text tag on it. And so as I create new projects for this one company, they will automatically pull themselves into this smart collection.
But define what a project is. It may not be what someone unfamiliar with Final Cut 10
Sure,
thinks.
like in Premiere, you would create a project and you would have one project file and you would have timelines within that project file. In Final Cut, a project is basically a timeline. Your library is your main file on your computer, and within the library you have projects, which are timelines. Apple just kind of renamed everything when they made Final Cut 10. That's true. You just have to kind of learn what the new names are.
Matt, killer feature of one single killer feature of Media Composer.
I would say the editor itself. I mean, it's not as sexy as these newer features, but the fact that, you know, if you're doing script-based material, you've got you can have a line script, which is a great an alternative way to organize your media if it's script-based.
You don't need to take your screen, anything out there?
Yeah, actually, if you want to show the screen, the editor itself has a really cool feature that I like. It allows you to actually load the clipboard contents and actually use that as a video source, complete with tracks and just like you're cutting in from another timeline. And that's really what I love the most about Avid, is it has a lot of unusual but very useful features that once you know about them, once you've gone through the learning curve, you have just a dozen different ways to solve any particular problem, and you can edit really fast.
And that's like if you have a timeline with multiple video tracks and audio tracks, a Command-C or a copy to clipboard, but you then load that in the left source side and edit that like brand new source media in a sense.
Yeah, and you can also look at the source, including that in the timeline itself, which is really helpful for visualizing it, selecting which tracks you want to insert from the clipboard or from any source, really.
Joel, what's your single killer feature?
So many.
Gotta pick one.
I would say because of the episodics that I do a lot, I love the master file editing that it allows you to do. What that means is, let's say you have a timeline with a bunch of interviews, several interviews, different people, whoever, doesn't matter.
Do you want to show us on the?
Sure. I don't have interviews, but I have clips, and it'll give you the same effect. So let's say all these were interviews, right? And you've cut them out, you've taken out all the questions, so you only have answers, so you have a bunch of cuts, you know, just to kind of showcase what your timeline is, and you have all your markers on top, you can name your markers so you know exactly what's going on. If you double click one of those files, that's a bird, but let's say it was an interview, and you went to effects control, this is where you can just drop in any effect, right? Let's say you have a 3-way color grade, color corrector right here, you can bring that in, and you have access to change it however you want to. But that's only in that file, that specific file in that one instance. Let's say you wanted to do it, I'll undo, to that file wherever it's used on any timeline at any given time, multiple instances. You go to your master right there, right to the left, you see nothing. Bring the same timeline in there, and whatever you do to this, however you affect it right here, I'll just do something sort of drastic. That gets affected everywhere that file is now used, in any timeline, however many times. So an interview, for instance, you want to bring the contrast, you want to get the saturation, a little bit of sharpness, whatever the case might be, you can do multiple effects at the same time, and it gets affected wherever it's used. I think that's a brilliant way of speeding up.
And that's known as a master clip effect that was added a couple of versions ago.
Yes.
Scott, if I could say Final Cut can do that as well.
Let's see it. Do it.
Sure. Let's see. Go to a clip here. Let's see. If I right-click a clip here that's in my bin, I can say Open in Timeline. So here's basically the master clip with the audio file, and I can drag any, here's Magic Bullet Looks. Drag it on there. So now anytime I use that file from the bin, that master file, it's going to have that effect on it.
Nice, nice. Let's go to an Avid-specific question. Trim mode, often cited as one of Media Composer's killer features, since we're talking killer features. You can set up complex asymmetrical trims. You can dynamically play an edit and play a trim. You can dynamically slip and slide with JKL scrubbing. A few of the things that neither Final Cut 10 or Premiere are able to do. What would you tell the other candidates about the Media Composer trim mode that could sway them to your...
Okay. I guess it's mostly just, it's just very fast and responsive, and oh man, it's all keyboard based, so you can do it really quickly. I find when I'm trimming in Premiere, it's much more mouse based, much more point and click.
Which is a good, I think, distinction, and which is a good lead in the next question of how mouse-driven is the tool versus how keyboard-driven, because many editors will say that, the more you touch the mouse, the slower you're working. Media Composer, quite keyboard-driven, would you say?
Yes, definitely. I found that's a lot faster when you're editing, because with the mouse, you can only click one thing at a time. With the keyboard, you can just fly. So.
What about
I would say
keyboard editing in Premiere?
With my mouse, but that's just because...
wait, say that again?
I said I could definitely fly using my mouse, but I don't think that Premiere is a mouse-driven type of interface. I mean, when it comes to trimming, sure, it's for me specifically, because I've done it so much, it's just so second nature to me. I can do it super fast with my mouse, but on my keyboard, especially at home, I have so much shortcuts where one button or a combination of buttons will do multiple things that really enables me to be fast. For me, the shortcuts on the keyboard is what allows me to step away from my mouse if I needed to and still get that same result. So I don't know that I would agree that Premiere is more of a mouse-driven interface, and that's what you have to do all the time. I mean, it's customizable, back to my first point, so you can do whatever you want to do. Perhaps Avid leads in that, but I wouldn't say Premiere doesn't have that ability.
I would say that was a criticism, early criticism of Final Cut 10 was it's so mouse-driven. Would you agree with that, or do you think it can be keyboard-driven as well?
Now with I have a lot of custom keyboard shortcuts that eliminate the need for the mouse for me, especially with my media logging and favoriting and things like that. I programmed next clip, certain different things where I can just sit on the keyboard for an hour and just go through clips, just like this. So.
Metadata. That's a big buzzword in our wonderful world of film and video production now these days. How do these guys handle metadata? Whoever wants to take that one can take it.
Not so well.
Okay, why? Why not?
If I had to guess, I haven't been talking to Mr. Adobe himself about it, but if I had to guess, I think they're really leaving a lot of that information to more of your classic way of organizing within the actual program, such as color coding it and multiple bins and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to metadata, they don't really match up at all when it comes to, for instance, 10, because I've used 10 and I'm like, metadata rocks in this. So will they get better? Will they start to improve in some of that? And maybe, I don't know, if enough people complain about it. And that's certainly one thing Adobe is really good, is at listening to their users and figuring out how they can improve and make things fit for them without, of course, looking exactly like perhaps their competitors looking. But I would not say Adobe rocks in the world of metadata, unfortunately.
So he mentioned Final Cut 10 metadata. How does it?
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it multiple times tonight. Collections and keyword bins.
Yeah.
The renaming collections are bins. Folders and just adding notes and custom keywords, it just really speeds up your workflow to be able to do that. I mean, if you go to my screen real quick here, back to these smart collections. I don't know if you can really see, but there's so many different options here to filter media by text ratings, media types, project types within the library. I can select a filter on here and it'll show me all of the used media, so I can know, oh, I haven't used this clip and I have used this clip. Even to go as deep as facial detection and saying, oh, these are all close-up shots, these are all wide shots. This is a shot of 2 people, this is a shot of 3 different people. Just lots of different powerful metadata tools you can use in organizing your footage.
Any metadata talk on Media Composer?
Yeah, I think Avidus definitely needs to improve in metadata. They've got a lot of traditional columns of stuff you can add. You can add your own custom columns, but in terms of what Final Cut has got, I would like to see more of that in Avid.
Let's go to another Twitter question we had. This came from Alex Gollner. He was asking sort of a two-parter. What is available as far as the ecosystem around your NLE, as far as third-party plugins or workflow tools? About what is the plugin architecture that third parties can write to? Is it powerful, and is there a good community around it, both paid as well as free? And beyond that, like what about the online community? If you need help, you hit forums or hit Twitter. Are there users out there, enough users out there to sort of have a nice, robust online community? Joel, I'll start that one on Adobe.
I would say yes. There's a really good community of third-party filters for Premiere. I mean, it comes with some decent stuff, but you're obviously going to want to add in some stuff depending on what you're doing. Boris, FX Factory, the name brand ones, I mean, they'll give you some of the free versions of it for sure, but I mean, obviously if you want some really nice stuff, you're going to have to spend a little bit of cash on it. I would say that the infrastructure of what Premiere is allows a lot of third-party companies to create really good filters and plugins for it. That was one of the things I was super excited about when I went from 7 to Premiere, was the fact that I could, a lot of the plugins I already had Premiere versions of it already, and it was an easy, just simply install it, and I had it right there. In terms of the forum and just an online community, I think you'll find a really good, strong community where people are talking about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what's a waste of their time. You really want to know those so you're not wasting money and wasting your time and trying to figure out what plugin might get you that effect. But now you're ending up with companies who may specialize in only like lens flares or just overall lighting type plugins, and they're making now a wider range of plugins that would work for you, so you can go to sort of one-stop shop. You go to one company, you get all the plugins you need, and you're sort of ending up with this domination of plugins on the outside network for these third-party filters. Adobe is just sitting in and being like, hey, whoever wants to make it, just make it. We'll make it work for you. We'll support it. We have the infrastructure to allow it to do it. And it works great, like I said, with my 4K footage all the way down to 1080p. So,
Jeff, what about that same question for Final Cut 10?
Yeah, originally when it first came out, Final Cut was very limited in what it could do. Once they finally launched the plugin architecture with FX Plug, with Motion, allowing you to make your own plugins in Motion, a $50 program, and import those into Final Cut. I mean, basically anything you can imagine now is in Final Cut 10, from Red Giant. There's a company called Core Melt that makes motion tracking built into Final Cut. They make a great stabilizer that's very comparable to Warp Stabilizer in After Effects and Premiere. Other plugins from Alex, who
That's the question.
on
Yeah,
Twitter.
Alex
He does a
4D
ton
on
of
Twitter.
plugins, paid and free. I use a ton of his stuff. Even plugins, Red Giant bought Automatic Duck, so you can easily go from Final Cut 10 into After Effects and back.
They didn't buy Automatic Duck. Red Giant is selling. They're the sales mechanism for Automatic Duck, but that's still
Yeah.
same owners. But any more? Let's see what Mini Composer has for.
Well, Avid actually has a built-in marketplace where you can, any plugin you want, audio video plugins, are available through the app itself, either free and for pay. It also has a really strong plugin from Fusion, from Blackmagic Fusion, that allows you to actually use the Fusion, which is a visual effects application, if you don't know, directly within the app. And it also has really robust and strong OMF and AAF export capabilities, so you can move your sequences into Pro Tools, into any other tool, whether it's DaVinci Resolve, and so you don't necessarily need to rely on plugins. You can use any application that's available to you to move your sequence, to finish it, do visual effects, do audio work, whatever you want to do.
Let's go to a Final Cut specific question here. So Apple very famously and somewhat notoriously has bought up tools, products, introduced them, and then killed them without so much as a notice. Quite a few of them, I might add. What would you tell the Final Cut 10 curious about? How would you address that for someone who may be wanting to get into Final Cut 10 if they have a fear that Apple just one day will dump it and no longer?
Yeah,
later
you know how they
support it?
had the full studio with, what did it have in it? Had an audio editor and color, all those different things. Yeah, shake. I mean, just me looking at it, I think Apple just kind of sat down and rethought what they needed to focus on, and that would be a solid editor and not all these additional little branches. When there's a lot of great other software out there that can do those really well and just integrate with those other pieces. So obviously Apple is focusing in the professional market on Final Cut and Logic, which are, two great pieces. And, you never know what Apple's going to do. But, when they did launch the new Final Cut, they did say that they have a 10-year plan laid out for Final Cut. And we are in year 4. So we'll just see what they have in store.
We'll go into an Adobe question that kind of goes on that same thing. You can't talk about Premiere without talking about the Creative Cloud and the subscription licensing model. Mm-hmm. Many people do not like the subscription model. They don't want to rent their software. They want to own the software. And Premiere, obviously, you can only get it through a subscription model now. How would you address editors who are, who do not want to buy in that model, or even an Adobe editor who just refuses to move past CS6?
I'm not against the rental, if you wish. You don't actually own the program per se. You're sort of leasing it, whatever word you want to use there. What they've done is they've made it affordable for the mass majority of people by doing it that way. Because before that was what, CS6, I believe, that you would have to buy. For them personally, if you're looking at it on their end, they've made it a little bit more security driven so that not anyone has access to a free hacked version of their software anymore. But it's a minimal cost. You want one program, it's $20 a month. You want everything Adobe makes? Everything Adobe makes. Like, just think about that for a second. Everything. It's $4 a month? Something like that.
And that's not just video tools, but print tools, web
everything.
tools.
I mean, we're talking Illustrator, After Effects, Photoshop, there's at least 15 more, gosh.
But you'll still be paying that when you're 60, 80, 90?
So there's always a cost associated with the work that you do. You're always going to have to buy a new machine. You're going to get new RAM. You get your camera stuff. You got to get new lenses. These are just costs associated with doing business. If we're talking pro editors, then that just needs to be added into what they're doing. Sure, there's something nice about having it on your machine and it's always yours and all that kind of stuff. The free updates are there with Adobe as it is with X, as I'm sure it is with Avid. Adobe likes to peep in on you once a month just to make sure you're current. But besides that, I mean, you're good. I'm fine with it. I'm more of a guy who likes to own my stuff. And when I saw the subscription, I was like, really? I can't like actually buy it? And then when I looked at how much CS6 really was, and if you did After Effects as well, and if you did Photoshop, if you did all these different things, you're thousands of dollars in the hole. This seemed like a much quicker way to just have access to all the software right there.
And what about Avid? Avid seems to have, saw the subscription model and saw the buy it model and said, we'll give you both, whatever you want.
Well, I'm fine with a subscription model too. That's what I'm on for Avid and also for Adobe. But Avid gives you the choice. I mean, you can own the software or you can subscribe to it. If you want the Symphony option, which adds some extra pro features, you can pay to have that or not. And so it's all about what's best for you and for your business. And Avid gives you the choice to either way you want to go.
And does Avid at one point, and I don't know if I can't remember if they still do it or not, do they still dongle? Can you still go to dongled version, or is it only software licensing? Does anybody know any Avid? Being that if you don't know what dongle is, it's a hardware key USB key that you plug in, and that is how it licenses. It doesn't have to ping the cloud. You don't have to be on the internet.
I don't think they make new dongles, but I'm not sure. I've never used a dongle for Avid, but I think if you've always had one, you can still continue to use it.
Let's move on to another Twitter question. This came from Tony Gallardo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this is kind of gets back to the thing about crashing a little bit. He was asking, how do these NLEs deal with corrupt projects? I mean, many of us who've had opened up a project in an application and the project file will not open. Final Cut 7 did that sometimes. What do you do when you have a project that's corrupt or won't open, or you've got media that consistently crashes? How do you guys deal with the problems that pop up like that with your tool? Any tricks or tips, or does it never happen?
Final Cut in a recent release now does automatic backups, and you can select where those backups go. So every little bit, it'll automatically create a backup of your library. So I have had projects where maybe a hard drive got unplugged randomly and corrupted the file, or some software crash. You just open up Final Cut, go to Restore from Backup, click the most recent backup, pops in the library, reconnects your media, and there you go.
So Adobe does a really good job at that as well. With the cloud structure, you can do your autosave. You can set that for as little as as a minute or as much as you want to. But for me, I think I do every 5 minutes. It's autosaving my project file, and it does it to the cloud. I can also do it to my actual hard drive, my desktop, so it's there in local. But security for me sounds good when it's somewhere else besides my actual machine. So I have access to a backup in case something happens. Now, what causes corrupt files and all that? Well, we can spend another debate just trying to figure out why that happens. It's that camera. Everything that comes from that camera seems to corrupt it'll happen.
That sounds more boring than this.
It really is. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to figure out really the problem-solving part of it. I think that having access to your backup files and backing it up. I think the worst feeling, this is when I was still on 7, was for some reason my autosave was turned off in Final Cut 7. And I'm working on an episode and I'm close, and it crashes. Like Final Cut 7 sometimes did. And when I reopened it, it was all bad. I mean, it would be easier to start the project open than to try to fix what was going on. And then I realized that my autosave wasn't on and I had nothing. And you're like, oh my gosh. And it's due in like 2 days, right? So the autosave is super, super key to have, and Premiere does a great job of keeping that whether locally or in the cloud, which I like the cloud.
Man, I would say Avid's a bit of a different approach, it works differently. You don't have a single project file, but yet each project has bins that are in a folder. You can sort of almost dig into the project as opposed to Premiere, where you've got one file that is your project.
Yeah, with Avid, everything is based around the bin, which is a file you can pass around rather than it being a virtual folder in your project. Each bin is its own file, and that's how a lot of file share or project sharing works. For recovering from crash projects, or if you're dumb enough to not back up the media but not the project file, which I've never done, the software has a feature called the Avid Attic, which every time you save creates a incremental copy of each bin. And so I've had corrupt project files, corrupt bins, accidentally deleted stuff, and every time I remember the Avid Attic, and it saves my bacon every time.
Let's go to a Final Cut 10 question. Jeff, I mean, one of the most positive things you hear from Final Cut 10 users and evangelists, if you will, they talk about the speed. It's fast, it's fast, it's fast, it's fast. Can be a bit of a vague term when you say something's fast. Explain why Final Cut 10 is faster than the others.
Well, it does. Apple doesn't.
Indeed, it is faster than the others.
Apple does a lot of stuff under the hood that's super technical, and GPUs and 64-bit and all that stuff, which a lot of these other softwares do. But that's one of the things Apple really does is focus on the underlying video processing and software foundations in Final Cut, is to really just make it handle footage really fast. Especially like I own a RED camera, and so I'm constantly throwing 4K files, RED R3D files into Final Cut, and it handles them so fast and so easily, skimming through footage even on just a normal 7200 RPM hard drive. It's just super fast in how it handles the media and reads it.
Can you show skimming? There's probably a lot of folks who haven't ever seen skimming in action.
Sure. I mean, I don't have any RED files on here, but
or just bring up
any media in general. You just turn the skimmer on, and you can skim through clips. And what do I want to look at? Oh, let's make an endpoint.
You're not clicking and dragging to be able to move that playhead.
I'm just moving my mouse around the screen, and you can go down here to your timeline and just skim through a project. It's just a great little feature, which I believe Premiere has a thing called Hover Scrub, which is kind of similar.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to show Hover Scrub? Sure.
Scrub-a-dub-dub.
Any others, while he's bringing it up, any other specific things about that makes it fast?
No, not really.
Joel, you got...
Sure. So I just have a few bins here. Look at my bottom area there. So I'm just scrolling my mouse over that particular thumbnail. Kind of similar thing. It does it right there, and you can obviously increase the size of those thumbnails if you want something a little bit bigger. But there's something to be said about I just love it right here and being able to have access to the whole thing right there. The scrubbing is great if you just want to really just kind of scrub through what you're looking at, but then having more access on a bigger screen for your in and out points, whereas in X you're literally only seeing it on your bigger screen. You don't have access to like this where you can set in and out points if you wanted to, and then dragging it into your timeline. So I like the scrubbing in Premiere, but I love the access in addition to that once it's loaded into the source window.
So that kind of brings up an Avid question. Avid doesn't necessarily have a hover scrubbing skimming thing. In fact, Avid itself is very, I don't want to use the term clunky, but you can do very little while you're actually playing the timeline back. You can't zoom in and out. You can mark an endpoint. You can't even clear in and out points. It's not fast per se, like what you just demonstrated there. How would you address a Premiere or Final Cut editor who says, Avid's clunky. I have to double click and hold my mouse down to do everything. I can't work fast because I'm constantly dragging stuff around and clicking stuff. How would you address that?
Well, I've always found that, just like he was doing, I can scroll in the bin, but like him, I like to bring stuff up in the viewer and drop stuff down. Avid has always been very, I've just found it has very low latency it always plays back. Even if I'm on an underpowered system and playing back RED footage, if I'm on a system that can't play it back, it's never sluggish or unresponsive when I'm editing. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, feature-wise, it hasn't necessarily kept up with some of the flashy things that Premiere can do, or certainly that Final Cut 10 can do, which I think leads some people to say it's kind of ancient and, a step behind. Is that true, or how would you?
I mean, I don't agree. I've found it to be, I mean, as fast as I can work in, it's faster for me than it is or than Premiere is.
That's a good statement right there, because you do use both. You use, I think you said
Yeah,
Media Composer predominantly is your choice, but I think your office uses Premiere.
yeah.
Is
we
that
use Premiere.
So if you were picking between the two, obviously you would pick Media Composer because
Yes.
that's what you're representing. All right, Final Cut 10 question. I use the term hardcore editors a lot. You know, professional advanced editors love to customize stuff, interface, keyboard, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's safe to say that Final Cut 10 has besides customizing the keyboard, it's probably the least customizable of the NLEs represented here. You can't do windows, you can't save layouts, you can't really move things more than a couple different things you can put on a second screen if you have dual screens attached. How would you address that from one of these guys said, you know, I can't customize it, you know?
You're very right, Scott. You know, you have your windows in Final Cut. You can drag the sizing around and that type of thing. But if you want to move your media browser from this side to this side, you can't do it. I don't have a problem with that. I find the layout they made works just fine for me. I don't really need to customize things and move them around so much. But that's just me and the way I edit.
Another question from Alex Gollner. He asked, what was the biggest misconception about your NLE of choice? Which I thought was a great one. Joel, what's the biggest misconception about Premiere out there, you think?
Well, I can tell you what my misconception of it was when I was still at 7 was that it really wasn't a pro NLE. I mean, I thought it was like the cheap, you know, using Premiere, huh? I guess you're not a professional. And then I actually paid attention to it, and I apologized to all my friends who were in Premiere prior to me switching, because I was like, this is actually a very strong, robust, customizable software that allows me to be the editor that I am and really dig down deep in some of this editing process and be fast. So I think the misconception is that perhaps it's not it wasn't at a high-level, pro-rated software, and it's definitely top-notch. I mean, it's super pro.
What's a big misconception about Media Composer?
Oh, that it's only for Hollywood and like big media companies that have multiple users, and it doesn't have anything to offer the single seat editor working out of their home or their own office. And I think it has the same things that are strong for Avid in the high end are still very useful. Like I mentioned earlier, it's really, really they're really strong on backwards compatibility and making sure that if you invest in their product, you don't have to spend more money just to keep doing what you're doing.
What about Final Cut 10 misconception? Not that there's any misconceptions about it.
Oh, no, none whatsoever. I think the biggest one would be is that it's iMovie Pro. Like, it does so much more than iMovie. I mean, I give it to you, it was very limited in the beginning, but 4 years later, it is so robust and there are so many features. It's not iMovie Pro. Just give it a chance.
Well, you know, misconceptions, it kind of leads into an Avid question. You know, Media Composer is, I think, undoubtedly at the high end of the food chain. Most features you see are cut in Avid. Most episodic TV is cut in Avid. Most reality is cut in Avid. Most high-end entertainment is cut in Media Composer. Why is that? Why has no one else been able to make those inroads?
Well,
Final Cut 7 was making some good ones, but not anymore.
Well, I think a huge part of it is that they got in there early and they really listened to top editors, and I think a lot of it just comes down. It's been around, so there are a lot of things that the high end needs. That they need things to be really reliable. They need things to be you need to meet deadlines, not have a lot of bugs, and when you encounter bugs, you need an easy way to solve them either on your own or with their support.
And I think collaboration is a reason that Media Composer is so strong, which to the other NLEs, collaboration with multiple editors or with just another editor who you may be working on shared storage, how's collaboration there, and collaboration with just say another editor across the country who's got the same media on their drive. How's Premiere with that?
Yeah, so if you're dealing with someone who's clear across the world and he's got the same media, then all you send him is that project file, then sure, they can keep going, maybe do an offline edit for you, send it back, here's what I've done, and then you dress it up with that same project file. The only thing you're actually sending is a 20 megabyte file versus all the footage. But that would mean that they would have to have all the footage for that to even work. One of the things that I really love about Adobe, specifically for me, is the fact that it's not just a Mac. In fact, it wasn't even Mac at first. It was all PC. One of my friends came over. We had to share an edit, and he had a PC. I'm on a Mac. No problem. I just media managed everything to a portable drive, gave it to him, and no problem. He was just editing on his PC while I'm doing some other stuff on my Mac. When he was done, he sent me the project file because I had all the footage. Opened it up, and we're good to go. Everything he did was right there. So the collaboration between Mac and PC, I think, is seamless, first off, and I think a really good thing when you're thinking about, if you're not in a situation where everyone has the exact same operating system, that's a really nice feature to be able to go back and forth. But overall collaboration, I think Premiere, they focus a lot on that single guy just behind his desktop. He's got everything and he's knocking everything out on his own. Sharing is perhaps not their strongest feature, though it can happen through media management, through the cloud with file sharing, through other software. If we can talk about just what other software Adobe does, if you're sending things to After Effects or Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that, then collaborating within its own family of software, it does seamlessly, brilliantly. So if you're a one-man shop where you're also doing your titles and your credits and all that somewhere else because you want more freedom, then you can do that using Adobe and you just come right back into Premiere. You want to go back to After Effects, I wanted the font to change, my client didn't like that, save it updates immediately in Premiere, that type of stuff. So collaboration within its family is great.
What about Final Cut 10 collaboration?
Yeah, collaboration probably isn't Final Cut's strong suit. I'm really hoping that's one of the next big feature releases coming for them, which I feel like it should be. I mean, there are workarounds, especially if you're working on just like a network storage. You can, export an XML or share the project file, library file. If you're referencing media somewhere else, you can create proxy media within Final Cut very easily and switch back between the two and send that to a different editor. But yeah, it's definitely not the best part of Final Cut. But there are workarounds.
What about every editor at some point in their life is a new user. How easy or difficult is it for a new user to sit down because these are all three work a little bit different, some more different than others. Just start Final Cut 10. How easy or difficult is it for a new user?
Yeah, I mean, if you have never edited video before in your life and you're sitting down to work, I think Final Cut is very intuitive. I think Apple likes to make things like they say where it just works. Like you feel like this is the way it should be done, that's the way it's going to work in Final Cut. So I think it'd be very easy for someone to pick up Final Cut, and the price point, again, is very attractive to people that are beginners. $300 and you're done.
What about Media Composer for new?
It certainly has a reputation of having a really steep learning curve. I don't really think that's true. I think it certainly works very differently than a lot of other nonlinear editors, but if it really only took me a couple weeks to pick it up. At the same time, it's one of those applications that's so deep that you can spend 10 years using it, and there are whole sections of the program you don't know anything about.
I would agree with that. What about Premiere?
Premiere, I would say, has a much less steep of a curve when it comes to learning it. If you're brand new, I mean, opening it up and kind of figuring out how to import your footage and starting the editing process for someone who's super new may take a little bit. I think the great thing about Premiere specifically is that there's tons of online free material, tutorials, and that kind of stuff where you can really learn every aspect of the editing process within Premiere in a very quick way. Even when I switched from 7 to Premiere, there were certain things that I was like, how do I track this, or how do I put a mask if I want to do whatever. I did this in Final Cut, but it's a little bit different. And a quick YouTube search, and I have my answers within just a few minutes, So the curve, I think, if you're really going to dive into it and spend a good solid 5-6 days, it wouldn't be that daunting at all.
Here's a question that just came in from Twitter 20 minutes ago. It's from Nick Allen. He says, which NLE is strong in multicam editing?
Me. Yeah, I do a ton of multicams. You can switch over to me if you'd like. This is a live comedy DVD we did with, I don't know, it was like 6 different cameras. It's really simple to make a multicam. Like here I've got all the clips. This actually has about 14 different audio tracks, but I just put 2 in here for an example. You know, you take your clips, you go over to your info and you say this is camera A, this is camera B, right click, make a multicam. You can sync it by audio, sync it by time code. You don't have to use pluralize or a different plugin. Set your resolutions, audio properties, bam, syncs it. Go over here. We did a documentary a few years ago on a tour, and we did 8 red epics for 3 hours. And we also did pickups, so those more like 12 different angles we were doing. Clicked a button, made proxies overnight, could easily just edit the footage natively and quickly in here. This is just off a 7,200 RPM hard drive, and everything's playing back perfectly smooth with no hiccups. You know, use the 1, 2, 3, 4 to just clip back and forth. It's just super quick and easy. It can handle up to 64 tracks of audio and video. Oh yeah, and once you make your multicam, you can even go in and edit your multicam. If you get something out of sync, you can see tracks here. It's the only tracks in Final Cut is in the multicam editor, but you can drag your tracks around to realign them, rename things. Oh, I want to reference this media, and this one needs to sync to it. I can click that and say sync selection to the monitoring angle, and it'll sync those 2 clips together. It's just got a lot of features for multicam.
Any other multicam for Avid or Premiere? Can you top that?
I can do exactly that in Premiere. I don't have any multicam examples, but I can certainly grab a bunch of clips. If I want to right-click, say make multicam clips, it puts it in the process bed, creates a sequence that I open up and it loads, and it comes in as one video file, one audio track. I can choose what my audio is as well. And then from there I can just start playing, and if I assign my numbers on my keyboard, and I have 6 different angles, I can, as it's playing, live switch by just hitting my numbers, and it creates cuts when I hit the stop, and I can go and trim if I want to and all that. So I think the multicam in Adobe is great. I don't have any issues with it as of right now. I don't use it a ton, but it works fine.
I mean,
I don't use multicam much, but I think both Avid and Premiere are pretty much on par with each other. You can sync pretty much by anything, endpoints, time code, pretty much, and you can have as many sources as you can put together, and then you can sit down and play it like you're switching a live show, and just cut with the keyboard.
you can't edit your multicam group in Avid once it's created, which I think is a common complaint with Avid.
That's really the only limitation. I hope they change that in the future.
So we had another question in from Twitter. This is from Adam Parizo. Forgive me, Adam, if I pronounced that wrong, but he's asking about Final Cut 10. While it appears to be the cheapest, how much did you have to spend on plugins or third-party tools to make it work? And maybe none.
Well, I have a lot of plugins. Some I've gotten for free from various projects and things. Some of them I've had to pay for. I think the plugin ecosystem around Final Cut also kind of is in tune with Final Cut's pricing. It's not super expensive. And there's a lot of free stuff out there too.
There was controversy when it came out about things like you couldn't export audio to Pro Tools. You couldn't easily get stuff to After Effects. You couldn't take a timeline, send it to Motion for effects. So there was paid tools that were kind of built up around that. Have you had to buy any of those extra tools in your?
Yeah, I have the tools that convert the Final Cut XML into XML that Premiere would accept. I've used that. Actually, that DVD project with the comedian that I was just working on, I'm doing the whole multicam in Final Cut, and then I'm going to convert that XML and send it over to a Premiere guy who's going to then take that into Audition and some different things that he does. I don't know what he's going to do. But I'm going to send that to him. You know, there's a plugin called X2 Pro that'll export all the stems and everything for Pro Tools directly out of Final Cut. So there's a lot of different tools that let you get in and out of the program now.
One more quick question, then we're going to go to the audience for questions. Biggest weakness that you see in your
Titling.
choice? Say again?
Titling.
Wait, you got Marquee, you got Title
got
Tool,
lots
you
of
got
options,
New Blue
but-
Titler Pro. Well, what do you want?
I want something that's, I just want one tool. I have to give props to Premiere. Premiere has really solid titling tools. You've got one tool that you can adjust any property, borders, fill, stroke. Premiere has Avid has lots of different options, but part of the problem is they're changing all the time. They've got this new plugin called New Blue Effects, but you don't know if it's going to be around for a while, if they're going to continue to have a relationship with that. I would just like them to revamp the built-in title tool to be something that's kind of all-encompassing.
Joel, what about Premiere? What's your biggest weakness? We can go on to Final Cut 10 while you're thinking.
Yeah, let me think about that.
All right.
I mean, there's a few I could name. Definitely needs a better keyframe editor, I think, for keyframing transitions and scales and different things like that. I'd say that'd be a pretty big weakness.
No mention of audio?
I was about to say audio is about 50% there. Maybe a roles-based mixing system, things like that would definitely help.
Joel, maybe there is no weakness in Premiere.
I know there is. I'm just trying to figure out what it is for me. So I don't want to make up anything. The few times I've had issues with it has been completely surrounding what I really think is just my machine when it comes to just its responsiveness. I think a lot of people would agree that perhaps when you start compiling a lot of footage into Premiere, like I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of gigs of raw footage, and it has to process all that the way it does it, you know, creating all the peak files and all that. You got to sit sometimes and wait for those to be written. And if you're like me, I don't like to wait. If I have my footage there, I want to go right away. And I think it's just waiting for some of those files to happen. Once you have your whole thing set up and you have just, man, a couple hundred just gigs of files in there, it feels like Premiere is like telling you, hey, I know that there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking at right now, so just bear with me sometimes, you know? and I don't like that. I'm like, listen, let's do this together. Because when I get going, when I get my momentum and my flow, you know, the kind of flow when your spouse calls you and tells you it's lunchtime if you work from home and you don't even hear them because you're just going, and then you have to stop because your program's like smoking, like that's annoying. And Premiere's done that to me a couple times, especially when I start dropping effects and color grades or whatever, and I'm mixing resolutions like 4K and 1080p. Because it's not doing an auto render like X would, though you can do an automatic render if you wanted to. It's just trying to power through all that on its own, and after a while, it does need a break. So,
Any questions from the audience for the panel? We've got a mic, I do believe, right there that Bobby's going to hand out. I don't know if we'll have you on camera or not, but.
Check, make sure that they can hear. Check, 1, 2. Check.
We can just yell it.
Or you can just yell it. Let's just try that.
Okay.
Checked.
Just curious
Okay.
for each of the editors,
There it is.
going back to the third-party plugins, if you had to assign a dollar value to all the plugins that you have on your computer for your NLE, even if it's the audio editor combined, what would all that total be?
you're gonna have to make me do math now.
I think while they're thinking, one question would be like, have you bought Bars Continuum or have you bought Sapphire? Because those are like, you know, 3 times the price of Final Cut 10. But
FX Factory is pretty pricey, you know, and they have all kinds of different things you can get with it. I've just selected just what I wanted, and that's been a couple $100 just for one of their, I think, 20 bundles that they have. So if you were to get the whole thing, you'd easily be a couple $1,000s in, you know. That's really where you're going to start spending your money is on those filters. I think for me, for what I do mostly, I'm maybe, in terms of value of my plugins, maybe at $500 or $600.
I'd say I'm probably less than $100. I found that what Avid comes with, it's really able to meet all my needs. I've never really needed to buy any third-party plugins.
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably on par with Joel. Final Cut does have a lot of plugins built in that I use, especially audio stuff. It comes with all the Logic plugins, which is great audio plugins. I use a lot of the Red Giant stuff, which, if you like Red Giant, you just missed out 40% off year-end sale. Sale at the end of the year. But yeah, I'd say Final Cut has a lot of stuff built in that I use, but you know, a few $100.
Got a question in the back?
Check. I think it works online. I'm representing the one editor y'all didn't even mention. I come from an audio background.
Sony Vegas?
Vegas Pro, yeah. Anybody
Started out in
comment
Vegas.
on Vegas Pro?
All right. Started out in Vegas.
I
Good
mean,
program.
it's one I've got Premiere and I've got Avid, but it's like I learned on Vegas, and it's like it's just so easy. I can do it with my eyes closed. You know. Any comments on Vegas? Nope.
I mean, I've got friends that use it. Everybody I know loves it. They swear by it. I know you can do a lot within one application. A lot of high-end audio features, but I've never used it myself. So,
I've never used it.
I think it was like the Avid DS. Everybody remembers Avid DS. The people who used it loved it and would like fight to the death. But I've been editing for 11, 12 years. I've encountered Vegas in the wild once. Question?
When Adobe developed the Mercury rendering engine, it was revolutionary because it did away with mezzanine codecs. It could work with camera native files. It was lightning fast. It worked well on standard def. It worked well on high def. My question is, how well is that working on camera native H.264 4K files?
Yeah. So let me describe to you real quick my setup that I have at home. I have a desktop. I have a 30-inch monitor. Then I have a 42-inch television on top. And Premiere will see all three of those monitors, and you can send your video out to each one. So obviously the 42-inch is where I have my output going to. Anything that I work in that my base is usually 1080p, 30 frames for broadcast, 2997. So if I'm bringing anything, for instance, from the Phantom 3 that shoots 4K, what the Mercury system allows me to do is downscale from the 4K to 1080p, so I can go up to my monitor in real time, no issues. It never has given me an issue. It never has crashed as a result of me sending something to that monitor. It works flawlessly every single time. If I'm getting something from the Panasonic GH4, which is also at 4K, it does the exact same thing. If I'm working in a 4K timeline, the Mercury actually does a down convert to 1080p to match my television for me in real time as a result of that Mercury with no issues. Am I answering your question at all?
What is the response in terms of your JKL performance on a 4K timeline?
It is very responsive. So JKL meaning forward, backward, stop, reverse, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I have no issues with it. Whether I'm using the mouse to scrub through something. Now, a lot of it will also depend on, in Premiere, your resolution preference, right? If you're going to go back at full, then you're really going to demand some power from your computer. If you want to go down to half, then that makes it a lot easier to play back your 4K stuff when you're going up to another monitor, or not, all the way down to a quarter, but then you start losing your actual picture, and that's sort of useless to me personally. So half is usually the least I have ever gone. It will start to struggle if you get to full. Does that make sense when I say full? In Adobe, you can choose from full to all the way down to a quarter res.
What hardware?
What hardware? So I'm on an iMac. So iMac i7 3.4, clocked out with a 2 gigahertz graphics card, 32 gigs of RAM.
What's your storage speed? You're obviously probably Thunderbolt connected to.
I have, it varies from a G-RAID or the Drobo. My internal stuff is just to run the application, but in terms of project drive, it's Thunderbolt or eSATA 3, and it still works fine on that.
Yeah, I think, that's a good question when it comes to it's often dependent on that hardware because, Final Cut 10 is very good at playing back high-resolution files, but you could have Final Cut 10 hooked up to a little, you know, a small, like, portable USB, even USB 3 drive like he's got up there, and it's not going to play back that 4K stuff as good as Premiere or Avid hooked to a super fast RAID. So there's, you know, there's so many factors that go into, you know, good performance of the high-resolution stuff.
Yeah, for the high-resolution stuff, if I can make one last point, you have to find what the bottleneck is when it comes to that, because the demand is going to be super great. No matter how you swing it, it's just going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so much res that you want me to play back, and it's going to need, so your hard drive is super important for that kind of playback. Now, that's just one clip. And then you start stacking them up, and then you put a 3-way color correction on there, and you put text on top of that. I mean, it's going to demand a lot. And fast connection from your hard drive is super important for that kind of playback, for sure.
Any more audience questions? We've got a couple more minutes before we'll go to the raffle. Let's go over here. I saw yours first.
So out in the real world, there's just many different people that use many different things, and most of you actually own at least 2 or all of these different programs. Which one would you say is the easiestly compatible with each other? Because people work with, like you're working on a Final Cut project and you're sending it to a Premiere guy. Which program is easily compatible with everything else out there?
Well, I
can answer that, but go ahead.
I use both Premiere and Avid, and I found they're pretty even. I know under certain circumstances, there can be a few extra steps in bringing an OMF, a large OMF, into Pro Tools, but for the most part, I've found they're both pretty solid.
In Premiere, it allows you to go to, if you're going to go to X, for instance, really relatively easy. I mean, just in your file export setting, it says export Final Cut Pro XML, right? So it makes it relatively easy using XML to go to X if you wanted to.
It's, you know, I think there's a caveat to that, because one of the most difficult things in all of post-production is going NLE to NLE. It's easy to go from NLE to Resolve, NLE to audio. There are tools for all that, but going NLE to NLE is difficult. Like the Final Cut, the XML export out of Premiere will not go into Final Cut 10. That's the Final Cut 7 XML. Final Cut 10 uses a different flavor of XML, but there's third-party tools that can actually convert that from one to another. Resolve, wonderful free tool from Blackmagic, you can use that as sort of a byproduct to convert. There is tools from Intelligent Assistants that does a fantastic job of converting those XMLs. You know, Automatic Duck back in the early days would make programs to convert from, you know, the AF to something else. So I still think it's quite difficult, but it can be done. But it's one of the more difficult things to do, you know, when you talk about post collaboration from NLE to NLE. We had a question back here.
They've done shootouts in the past with the different digital audio workstations like Pro Tools and Digital Performer, and comparing like the math that the internal mixers have and the sound quality that each program has, and like the audiophile guys have determined like which one they think sounds the best. Do you guys think any of these programs have an edge over the other in terms of their math, their ability to?
I think that's a good question just to address audio in general, and we can kind of go down the line on that.
But also the picture, you know, like,
yeah.
Do they do the math any differently when you apply the same filter?
I'm not sure how the math works, but I know one good thing with Final Cut and Apple is that they build their software and their hardware to work together for the best possible product. So they're going to build the computer to really harness the software, and the software to really harness the power of the computer. So I don't know how that works mathematically and technically, but I feel like that is an edge up on Apple.
Well, Avid makes Pro Tools, and Avid has been integrating some Pro Tools technology into Media Composer. You apply filters, you know, into the timeline, into a track itself, and there's a lot of plugins.
Yeah, they've definitely, they basically stolen from their own product as far as how audio works. You have the ability to apply effects to an entire track, which is something that comes from RTAS plugins in Pro Tools. The
RTAS meaning real-time audio suite, because I think you can apply 4 effects at a time per track, if I remember correctly, and they're all, as long as they're RTAS plugins, they're all real time.
Yeah, they've basically copied, almost directly copied what they have in Pro Tools, and they're moving the integration between the two, using a lot of the same hardware, and I think ultimately what they're heading for is a common timeline between the two, or to have that level of integration.
What about Premiere as far as audio?
I really like the features that I get with audio in Premiere. I love the audio mixer that you get, whereby, for instance, let's give a quick sampling of how I do my episodes, right? I'll have on, we're talking audio here, interviews, so all your main interviews, natural sound, anything that we get from cameras that might be there. These are reality television shows, so you got a lot of just nat stuff, and then a couple layers for that, and then music, and then perhaps sound effects, all right there within Premiere. But I have them organized that way so that anything that has to do with interviews I know is going to be in the first track. If I have voiceovers, then that gets the first track, interviews gets a second. And then I can go to my audio mixer and I can see all those tracks right there, and I have access to the entire length of those tracks, and I can do anything with them, from as simple as panning and volume to specifically all the effects that I can drop onto these. For instance, a compressor or a limiter or an overall EQ or a hum remover, whatever it is you want to do. Once you apply it to your master mixer, it gets applied to that entire track, which means no matter what you put into that track will be affected based on what you put into that master audio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Premiere has both clip-based mixing and track-based mixing.
Correct.
You can apply effects to a single clip, or you can apply effects to an entire track.
Correct.
So it's sort of got the best of both worlds if you know.
Need that.
Yeah.
Yes. And for episodics, I've found it works really well and it's super fast. I mean, if you're getting stuff where things are just all over the place in terms of what it sounds like, in terms of its EQ, that's really heavy on the bass. That guy's interview's mic was stuffing his shirt, and so it's thrown, and I was like that. And this guy sounds really clear. Then you might want to go and do more clip-based type editing before you do your master overall editing on that.
So maybe they can get the math question, but
I didn't know about the mixing.
yeah, a little feature-wise. I know we had a couple more questions. Let's go. You asked one. We'll go back here.
So I'm just curious. I'm also a good friend of Jeff, and he and I kind of have similar workflows with Final Cut as far as just kind of getting your clips, organizing them. One of the biggest things to me that I love about Final Cut is favoriting, and Jeffrey kind of mentioned it, but didn't go into extreme detail about it. I'm just curious how you guys manage culling things, and are you putting things in the timeline, putting clips there, dragging over, moving this over here? I'm just curious about what's your workflow when you just start your day,
Sure.
Sort of that basic organization you need to do first, because it does work entirely different in Final Cut 10 than it does in Avid.
Yeah. So I'm a binge-driven guy. A lot of the times my setup in Premiere will relatively match really what I have in my Finder. So if it's day one, camera A, camera B, and everything that's associated with those, day two, and it keeps going, Phantom, interviews, whatever, I'm really organized in my Finder, and a lot of times that will translate right into Premiere. How I organize it, furthermore, once I get into Premiere, is I color code a lot of stuff. Things that I really like will have specific colors, and in Premiere you can change what those actually mean. You can change the colors and call them different things, whatever suits your needs, but you can color code them, which is great. I'll make additional bins or bins within bins so that I can have files that I just put within those bins that I know that I really love, or that I might want to use for something more generic type stuff. Things that aren't specific to a specific day, they're just general B-roll that I can use wherever I want to. And I'll just name it general B-roll, and it's going to be all right in there. When I get to my timeline, a lot of the times I'll start off, the first thing I'll do, because it's so story-driven, is I'll start off with my interviews. So my first sequence that I make is nothing with regards to the whole show. It's really just the content of the interviews. Take out the questions, what are they actually talking about? I'll make my marker notes so I can see it there. I can view by my markers within Premiere so I can see where all my markers are. I can see what they're named. He talks about conservation. I want that part right there. He talks about whatever. And once I'm done with that, I have a really good idea what the show is going to be based on what the interviews are, because that's what it's going to be for this particular style of editing. Music videos are a little bit different. Different things have different ways of doing it. I'm talking about episodics specifically. And then from there, I'm going to start in a new sequence. So my interview sequence remains the same, and it's called interviews. And I start my new sequence where the actual show will start, and that's where I start pulling in from my sequence called interviews back into my main timeline. And I go to my bins for my B-roll and my aerials and all that kind of stuff. It works really well for me, and I'm very fast at piecing an episode together that way.
For most of my projects, I actually like to start out on the timeline, just throw everything on there, and then whittle that down into selects, the shots I like. And then once I've kind of got down the footage whittled down to what I like to edit, I'll throw that up in the viewer and then cut from that. If I'm doing something like a music video, I'll actually spend a lot more time filling out the columns, putting in shot size, take number, and then I'll also import a transcript of the actual song lyrics, and I'll throw it up and use its script-based tool. So I can actually, if I want to find a specific line, I can find that line in the song in any shot I have. And I find that's the best way to organize that. So,
Question?
In your, all the software kind of updates at different intervals, so within a recent time frame, say like a year, what is the favorite new feature that your NLE has added to?
I guess 64-bit, more performance-related stuff. Support for more video cards. Probably the biggest thing in the last couple of years has been moving away from just supporting their own video hardware to all the different manufacturers for I/O boards. So that's really been the best thing.
Apple updates has been on a current timeline of updating Final Cut about 3 to 4 times a year, which is pretty great. The latest update, they introduced 3D text, which is very similar to like if you use Element in After Effects. It works very similar with that. So that was kind of a nice add. So if I do 3D text, I don't have to go into After Effects and Element and do all that there and then export a ProRes over here. I can just do my 3D text in Final Cut now.
For Premiere, I'd say more codec, because Premiere will it's designed to take any codec to just drop right in there in the timeline and you're good to go. Its biggest challenge is keeping up with all the new codecs that might be coming up, or variations of a codec, for instance, that might be coming through different cameras and the manufacturers of those cameras. A lot of my stuff is based around MXF files or DSLR files, so H.264, .mov type files, and so for the most part I'm covered really from the very basic level of what Adobe does. But for someone moving into more just different variations of codecs, then Premiere does a really good job of just keeping up with that constantly.
We got time for one more question? Then we'll have their wrap-ups.
So I'm a motion graphics guy, and a lot of organizations will hire me to do like graphics packages, lower thirds. And since the Final Cut 10 came around, being able to build stuff in motion that they can just drop in and custom transitions and just all kinds of crazy stuff. Whenever they ask me to build for Avid or Premiere, I find that my knowledge of those programs is a little bit more limited, and building their custom transitions especially is a little bit tougher. Can y'all speak to educate me on how you go about when you have to put in a custom transition or however you do it, what the best practices for those kind of things are?
Well, with Avid, there's three effects in there that are kind of like Swiss Army knives that you use to make anything: the paint tool, the animat tool, and the 3D warp. And those things are the names are kind of misleading, but they're basically tools with a ton of different features that allow you to do almost anything effects-wise. And so I would start there, learn those 3 plugins, and just experiment with them all the time. And then if you've got those, you'll be pretty solid.
So specifically for transitions, I rely a lot on my third-party plugins and filters to come in to take care of those things. I'm not making my own transitions per se. I'll have some like overlays, some light flares or stuff that I'll put on top of it, right where a cut might be, and I'll maybe do a screen in my opacity in terms of how I blend it, so it looks and feels nice, and it looks like I might have added in a really high-end organic flare, when in reality it was just a digital file. I use a lot of stuff from Rampant, and they have some really nice 4K and 5K type stuff, all QuickTime based, and you drag it right into your timeline, and you can just blend it right in there. So I'm not a big user of creating my own transitions, as I am just using my plugins and adding some of those really nice flares to make it sexy. So
I'll say transitions is a bit of an interesting thing, because like neither Media Composer or Premiere work like with say After Effects in the same way that Motion does of creating those different effects in those transitions. But both Media Composer and Premiere, if you make transitions that has like an alpha and a fill, they can support those just as easily as Final Cut 10 can. All right, we're going to let you guys wrap up. Let's do a wrap-up statement from each of you guys, almost like an elevator pitch. If you're, someone walks in and you say, I'm a Final Cut 10 user, and they're like, why should I use Final Cut 10? We'll go down the line, starting with you, Jeff. Wrap it up and tell us why.
Sure, I think
everybody should go to Final Cut 10.
Final Cut, when it first came out, was very limited. It got kind of a bad rap. 4 years later, it's strong, it's thriving, it's got a great community built around it, especially with third-party plugins, things like that. All the features that you may have thought were missing and weren't there, they're probably there now. And Apple, when they created Final Cut 10, it was very different, and that's kind of what Apple's thing is. Think different, we're going to be different, we're going to create the next NLE for the next generation of editors. So that's what they've done. They've got a 10-year roadmap for Final Cut 10. We're in the end of year 4, I think. So I think they've got some really great things they could do as far as collaborative editing that, there are rumors of things like that in the pipeline with iCloud and things like that. I hope that even if it's not the tool for you, that you would maybe just give it a second chance and take a look at it. And if you haven't looked at it in a while, it's probably, it'll do a lot more things than you think it can.
Well, I think Avid's greatest strengths is that it's a much more stable application, and it's much more oriented toward I think serving the needs of the business owner, to the point where like I said when I started out, is they don't force you to upgrade. They support older versions of the software. They make it so that projects you create in a new version of Avid can still be opened in an older copy. So that ensures that when you invest in their product, you don't have to upgrade until you really need that added value. And for me, that's I'm a penny pincher. I don't want to spend money I don't have to, and I think that's Avid has my interest at heart more than I feel the competitors do.
One of the toughest decisions I had to make was switching from Apple to a non-Apple product. I'm an Apple guy. I have an Apple computer, I have Apple phone, Apple products at home, and so that was a long several days of trying to figure out what do I do next. Didn't cry, but I was close to it because it was such a tough decision. You got to understand, I've been doing it for 8 years, and now you're telling me it's going to be different. And so when I step back and I look at these two different companies, Adobe and Apple, for me, I had to take note at the company that was willing to make and go that extra mile to adapt their software to be what the market was doing, what the market was used to, and what the market really demanded at that point. Apple, on one hand, will say, new generation, this is what we're doing, so jump on board. I don't really like that. Don't really like when people tell me what to do, because I love creative freedom and I love control over the process when it comes to post-production. It's my style. Premiere gives me the ability to keep up with that style and still be extremely fast with my editing process. So that's why I would suggest Adobe Premiere.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to give these guys a round of applause because, they've put themselves out there. I'm just kind of watching some Twitter comments come in. We all read this stuff on the internet, and rarely do people have the guts to sometimes sign their name. There's a lot of anonymous comments out there. And, everybody's workflow is different. Everybody does things a bit differently. What Matt works on is different than what Jeff works on, which is different than what Joel works on. And I think, no one knows what every single thing about all these NLEs, and as much as I like to think I know, I'm often completely wrong about something that one does that another one doesn't do. And just a quick round of applause before we wrap up. Thank you guys for putting yourself out. This is on their own time. It's just a fun thing that they agreed to do. And again, these are all tools. They're all used to tell stories. None of them is any better than the other one. They can all do the same thing. Sony Vegas can do what these things can do. But I think here's a good quote from Shane Ross, who's an editor I know in Los Angeles, who he tweeted this a few minutes ago, and we'll wrap it up with this. Quote, "Can you import video, edit it, and export it to meet your client's needs?" Unquote. Yes. Debate over. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, but when Scott approached me to do this event, I was saying, "Are you sure you want to get dive into this head first?" And he said yes. So I was like, "Okay, if you're crazy enough to want to do it, then we'll be crazy enough to actually put it on." But to do all this, obviously the guys who came out to put their necks on the line, but we're live streaming. We have all the audio set up. All this took time, effort, and manpower. So we have some sponsors tonight, as you see up here. And so I wanted to give a minute to some of these guys who are here. Matt from Blackhawk Cinema. We have Zach from True Audio. Jonathan from Studio 615, which is our, they host the Nashville Filmmakers Guild. We're very grateful for them. So I just wanted to give a minute for each of them, kind of talk about what they do, kind of so you know who they are and who these sponsors are. So Matt, you want to come up first? And he's still switching back there. So here's Matt from Blackhawk Cinema.
Hi, I'm Matt from Blackhawk Cinema. It's good to see some familiar faces and people I haven't met before. If you get a chance, come back and take a look. We've got our robotic cameras here, some different models, and we've got our flypack switcher. Blackhawk Cinema, we're just down the road here on the other side of Dickerson Road. We cohabitate with TNDV, Nick Duggar, if you've ever heard of that name, so we share a building with him. We're a global video production company. Our productions this year we've been in 6 continents, 6 of the 7. So we're hoping next year we can get to Antarctica or do something with penguins. I don't know. But we travel a lot. We pack up our gear. We move around. What you can see right here, Stuart back there, Stuart Schuster. He is Chief Awesome Officer back there. And he has been running 4 robotic cameras simultaneously during the event. So we can take and create a small TV studio and put it on the road. We do a lot of things with technology. We have cable cam systems. We use the FreeFly Taro. We've been flying UAVs. Some people use the D word for about 15 years. We currently, I checked today, I just got my 3 new aircraft today. We right now have the most ratings of any company in the United States. We are certified to fly 26 individual aircraft that are unmanned. We also have manned aircraft that we fly for CMT, CMA, and all that. And we also work with Van Wagner, which is the blimp company. So we get to work with MetLife and Budweiser and DirecTV and fly around in those big blimps. And they're all based in Smyrna, if you didn't know. Middle Tennessee is the home of pretty much all the blimps in the world. But I'm just glad to be here. We've got some toys back there. Come back there if you want to play with some of the RoboCams and move them around and push some buttons and see our switcher and all that. But it's just good to be out here and be part of a group like this. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Zach from True Audio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach with True Audio. Have any of you guys rented from True Audio or bought from True or anything? Yeah. Well, I'm the rental manager there, and yeah, I mean, all of this is really awesome. But if it doesn't sound good, then you kind of wasted your time. So good audio equipment. We work with local not sound mixers, video editors and all that all the time. If you guys have, low budget stuff, we're really helpful with Nashville people. So, yeah, if you need anything, just give True Audio a call. Ask for Zach. You'll probably be talking to me anyway in the rental department. So, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Jonathan, is Jonathan around? Oh, Kevin. Okay, so Kevin from Studio 615.
Yeah, so this is Studio 615. We opened up about 6 months ago, and the owner is the same person that owns Center 615 on Main Street. But he and I partnered to create this facility that we brought from CMT. The lights in the ceiling are financed by TVA. We underwrote a loan with them to get a very awesome interest rate to help pay for them and their state-of-the-art LEDs that we got from Four Wall Cinema. And we love supporting events like this, and we love it when you guys support us. We're new to this, and we need to book people's events, video and photo shoots here. And we also want to create a place where there are multiple companies under one roof. So right now we share this facility with Contrast Visuals, and we're looking for other small companies that want to share and be tenants in this building with us. So if anybody knows anyone that might be in the market, just let us know, and thank you for your support.
All right, so I don't know if you heard or saw, but we have some giveaways. So did anybody not get a raffle ticket? Well, Dave, you don't count. You know, you don't need to win anything. I'm just kidding. So we had one back here. You okay? Okay. We'll throw that in a pot. So we're gonna do some giveaways. We have giveaways from Able Cine, Blackmagic, Shutterstock, Sony. So some great prizes we're gonna give away here real quick. Brian's gonna, as soon as Brian gets done handing those out, we'll start picking. Also, we have some swag. We have some free stuff. So when we're done, we'll open that up. You guys are free to take. We got plenty of it, plenty of stuff. So we ready? Everything in there? All right, cool. Well, the first thing, what do we got for here? I'm gonna hold the bucket, and Brian, you tell them what we're giving away first.
Well, first we're giving away an iStock T-shirt and a grab bag. I don't know, diaper bag, depending if you have kids or not. I will say one of these shirts is a small, so we might have to give that away to smaller people. But these two. We later on we have Shutterstock. Sorry, gave away a bunch of mints and chapsticks, and we'll put this up here. Grab what you want. There is a ton of it here. So first bag.
First bag. All right.
First T-shirt.
Oh, let's see. All right. American Apparel. Ooh, nice. Okay, so 9. Everybody got their tickets out. All right. 920. 9222. Josh. There we go. All right. Next up is same thing, because we got a couple of them. Okay, I got 3. 920. 9250. Dave. I knew we shouldn't have given him a raffle ticket.
This is the small. This is the small.
This is the small. So maybe if you've got kids or a dog. 920. 9232. Hey, well. Okay. So what do we got next?
Next we have a pair of
Sony headphones.
Nice headphones.
Retails for, I don't know.
About
$90. All right. Nice. 920. 9236. Oh, we got a winner. Nice. Very nice. Okay, it's getting better. Not that those other gifts were not good.
That was a good gift. This kind of whet the appetite.
It was whetting the appetite.
Now we have Able Cinema gave away 10% offs, 10 T-shirts, 2 hats, and 2 free courses. So we're going to blend it together. We'll do a T-shirt, 1 coupon, and they also gave away, I don't know why, microfiber cloths. so
Can't go wrong with microfiber.
10%, and 2 full courses. Give them away with T-shirts.
Does that make sense? So 10 T-shirts with 10% off, and then 2, what was it?
Full courses.
Full courses, so it means they're free. With a hat. Nice. Okay, so the first one is 920. 9231. Nobody? They left? All right, well, go again. 920. They all start 920. 9. I should just read the last 2 letters, 2 numbers. 920. 9229. There we go. All right. This is going to take. All right, yeah, I'm just going to read the last two numbers because they're all 92092. And since we didn't have over 100 people here, so. Okay, last two numbers, 2, 4. Another one. I think everybody's probably going to get something here. I'm basically going to dump out the tickets. Okay, last two numbers is 3, 8. Bingo. Why did you get so much stuff to give away? 1, 8. Oh. I didn't know it was this one.
No. We're not giving that away.
No. Brian would be responsible for that. Okay, 4, 8. There you go. I hope we have people left for the big ones. I know, we'll have to put it back in. Okay, and 4, 4. 4, 4. Nada? Okay. Oh, someone did have 4, 4? Jason was leaving. Oh, okay, I was going to say Jason was leaving. All right, 2, 5. Winner! Okay, 4, 6. There's dust all in this thing. How many more? How many? 3 more? 4, 9. 4, 9. Did you guys get raffles? You guys didn't get a ticket? No. Oh, okay. Seems wrong for some reason. Okay, 4, 3. 4, 3. Matt! Zach, did you get a ticket? Good. 4, 2. Josh. 4, 7. 4, 7. Jason? Hey, you got something, Jason. Now you're glad you came. Training class. Was that the last one? Oh, is that the full that was a training class? Okay, and we have one more. All right, this is full training class and a hat and microfiber cloth. 3, 7. Someone that needed it. There you go.
Is it really it?
Yep, over here. All right, what do we got left? I know we have the Shutterstock.
We did Shutterstock.
No, we have the 5. Actually, you know what? I forgot to print it out. So if you win this, yeah, it's 5 free HD stock clips. I didn't print out the coupon, so you'll have to give me your email address so I can email it to you, if you're okay with that. Last two numbers is 4, 5. Zach. Okay. I have your email address, so it doesn't matter. All right. Don't let me forget. Okay. What do we got? Is that it? The big one?
Big one. So do you want to put everything in here, or want to leave it with these?
Oh, no.
Well, and then we got to say a word about Blackmagic.
Okay, so Blackmagic, if you're familiar with Resolve, no one was represented here from Resolve. We thought about it, but I think everybody, it was just such a new editor, because now, not only it's a color grading app, but now they've introduced where you now can start cutting, and it's gaining popularity. I think Matt's been using it. What's that? Yeah, Brian's been using it. So we didn't have anybody here, but Blackmagic was very gracious to give away a full version of Resolve, not the free one, the full one. What was that? So if we do a rebuttal, right? And that's gonna be done online, right? Online. So there's gonna be a rebuttal. So this is a full license Resolve. Got the license number on here. Where's the license number? Oh, the email. So you got the email address. I guess they didn't want us to print out the license number. So, all right, so this is for the full license resolve. Don't show it to robot. Well, it's not on here. You have to email them. Okay. Last two digits are 30. Yes. There you go. All right, so we still have, like I said, some free stuff. We got all this chapstick, mints. Please take it, because I don't want to take it home. And I will be. All right, dive in. Okay, we'll just set it right here. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. You guys have a great night.